play that Dermot, someone called Dermot
Judge.
Dermot Judge was in.
Yes.
And it was my first time away from home.
Yeah.
I was 18, 19, something like that. And that night in the theatre, and I was there, for me the space was iconic, you know, this was Mecca to me. So I had left home in Johannesburg and travelled to another city, away from my parents for the first time, away from home, living with complete strangers, knowing no one, and determined to do well and make my mark, and, you know, at the space, which to me was the ultimate theatre in, you know, anywhere. The kind of pressure I felt gave me my first panic attack. So I sat there in the theatre watching this play. This was my first experience of the space, and the walls started coming in. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to faint. I mustn't disturb the performance. This is the Space Theatre. I mustn't disturb the performance. So I tiptoed out of that auditorium and went, I knew not where actually, because I didn't really know the layout yet. This was my first day at the space, my first experience there. And I literally walked into the arms of Mama Lizzie in the kitchen, who hugged me, saw I was in a terrible state, and, you know, just hugged me and rocked me. And it somehow became the metaphor for, you know, in a way, for my next 6 months there. And Dermot that night took me to a hospital because, you know, I was having a panic attack. Yeah, that was my first experience of the space.
I'm just trying to figure out which play that would have been, because...
What was he in? I wonder if that wasn't something to do with clowns.
With?
Clowns? You've just mentioned a play.
1,000 Clowns.
Could that have been it? Dermot Judge? No?
I can't see it there. And unless you came down and then came back.
No, I came down and stayed. I literally...
Because you came with Duarte and...
Duarte and Caroline.
And Caroline, yes.
What had happened was that as I was finishing my last year of drama degree at Wits University, I read an article in... what would it have been? The Star, which was the Johannesburg newspaper, which said Peter Stevenson, Royal Shakespeare Company director, to be artistic director at the Space Theatre for 6 months. And it clicked with me because this, you know, I was driven by two things as a young woman of, you know, 18, 19, finishing university. I was driven by a desire to do something about the country I was living in, which was clearly so sick. And I had come there at the age of 9 or 10. So, you know, the unnaturalness of that system was probably even more shocking to me because it was something I hadn't grown up with from the year dot. And 1978 I graduated, and 76 were the Soweto riots. So, you know, just formatively, all the things that were going on in my young head. I suppose that as a young woman of 18, 19, I was really motored by two kind of prime instincts. One was to do something drastic, as I thought I could at that time, about this diabolical society I was living in, apartheid South Africa. The Soweto riots were in 1976. I was at university then. I was, you know, my whole kind of political awakening in a practical sense had taken place. And I knew that I had to do something about it. I remember being offered a contract at... Was it PACT? Yes, PACT, that was one, but there was also one in Johannesburg before I left, during my last year of university, because I had been, I suppose, quite a sort of, how does one say it? There had been a tension on me as an actor in my last year at university. I had done some prominent work or something. And was it the Bernardo, not the Bernardo Theatre, I can't remember. There was a theatre in South Africa, quite a commercial, in Johannesburg, quite a commercial theatre where they did a lot of comedies and stuff, whites only theatre. And I turned it down flat. I couldn't do that. I mean, so there were only 2 places in South Africa I could work in, or wanted to work in, could work in, the Market Theatre in Johannesburg and the Space Theatre in Cape Town. And the Space, of course, was this ultimate, iconic, from a political, emotional, social point of view, it was the ultimate place I wanted to work in. And then, coupled with that, there was a streak in me which was so completely and utterly blinkered and ambitious and self-motivated and actually quite selfish. I mean, it was a bizarre combination of selflessness and thinking about, people around me who didn't have rights, let alone the kind of luxuries I had, and also a selfishness of personal motivated ambition, and I had to have a great career, and somehow the conflagration of both of those, warring parts of me, one of which I'm proud of and the other of which I'm not proud of, but it's me. Both those things came together in this sort of spectacular explosion when I read this article, because there was a Royal Shakespeare Company director arriving at the Space, and I knew that one day I may well have to go to England because, there were only 2 theatres I could work with in South Africa. Was I going to spend the rest of my life there? I didn't think so. It wasn't actually my country. So it was a place I wanted to do something, make a difference in, somehow change things, see a proliferation of more theatres like the Space in the Market. But I knew deep inside that actually I also wanted to be on the big stage in the big wide world. So I remember going to Duart Sylvain and Caroline Newby, who were the other 2 kind of stars of my year at university, and said, "You're coming with me to the Space." We're going. And we're going to audition and we're going to get in. And actually we did. It was wonderful. It was well planned.
Yeah, it was. I sort of remember these 3 walking in and say, "We've come to work here." And I said, "Well, at the moment, there's absolutely
nothing
sod
going.
all."
It's okay, we'll wait.
then, do you remember the first thing you were in there?
Hitting Town, wasn't it?
It was a lunch hour. I'd forgotten.
Oh my God, the melodrama. Yes!
The mortgage.
The mortgage.
As I said, that's all we got. You want to do it, don't you want to do it?
Who did? It wasn't you who directed
that. A guy
that.
called Nigel Stevenson.
I remember. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
The Mortgage, how funny.
And then they absolutely bullied me into working with them. And I kept saying, there's nothing to do. We have no more spaces. Both spaces are being used. And she went upstairs and said, "There's this little room up there." I said, "Oh God, yes, fine." And I said, "Well, I don't have a play." So she went on. She came back with plays that we could get, and that was Hitting Town by Stephen Poliakoff. Said, "How about this?" Yeah. I said, "Yes, but who's going to direct it?" She said, "You can."
God. Is that how it happened?
Yeah, that's how it happened. Yeah,
really? Because you know what?
I was bullied.
I don't remember any of that.
That's why she's a producer now.
Well,
she's
obviously,
a
bully. But wasn't it brilliant?
Oh, it was fantastic.
It was a stunning production.
So just talk us through the Hitting Town area. So just give us a bit of background on that so we can...
Hitting Town... I certainly don't remember your version of events, which is that you were bullied into directing that. But I'm happy to accept it because it doesn't sound untrue to my nature. Hitting Town, Stephen Poliakoff was an incredibly intense 3-hander. And of course, Caroline and Duart and I had worked very closely at Wits University. So it was very suitable, actually, for the 3 of us. And you did a brilliant job on directing that. I think it was one of the highlights, that production, of certainly the time I spent there. It was very, very unique and all-embracing and quite shocking. the audience were right up close. And actually, one of my memories, again, a painful memory for me, was that this whole sense of, the panic attack I had when I first went to that first night at the space, it used to recur a bit. I don't think I ever told you that because I was scared, that you'd, I don't know, replace me or something, and I it kept on coming back every now and again. I mean, I think kids leaving home do have that. 5 out of 10 of us or something, I later discovered do. But it was so scary being in such a small, confined space. So Hitting Town was an extraordinarily intense experience because we would have audience members literally sitting right here. And of course, the thing that you had to ensure, and I think so brilliantly ensured, was that every second was true. Every second was, had to be observed to be totally real and totally true. And that degree of scrutiny, that up close, led to the most magical experience, both for the actors and for the audience, I think. And also the fact that only 25 people could fit in that tiny little space and were sharing this hugely intense experience made it feel kind of sacred and like a very privileged experience, that literally dissected human behavior and the issues that Polyakov was looking at in that play. Immensely special. I think it's probably one of the most special experiences as an actor that I've ever had, of anything I've ever done. So that was an experimental, as it were, out of season or out of the Space's basic program production that you were apparently coerced into directing. Thank you for being coerced. Then what were the other great, the other great and memorable plays we did in that 6-month period I was there? Arturo Ui. Can't remember whose idea was it to have women playing men. I think it was just that what we did at the Space, of course, and what was partly so special in a creative sense about the work that was done there was that there were no resources other than passion and imagination. Those were that was the currency we had to work with. There was no money. Everybody was working from their hearts for nothing. God, I remember, again, this was the sort of nascent producer in me somehow, but I remember getting Duart and Caroline and I, who had no money to live on, got them together and I said, hey, you know what? These cinemas, people go to the cinemas here in Cape Town. Let's get a little magazine going. We'll call it the Cape Town Film Scene. Duart, you can write the articles about the stars and and the films and we'll go round the shops of Cape Town and get them to buy advertising. And we ran this little printing press. We got Moira Fine's permission to do this kind of bizarre commercial enterprise to keep afloat. And yeah, that's how we kind of subsidized our living there for 6 months. But the extraordinary thing about the Space really was that, with no design budget, you had the most astounding design because it was so imaginative, because it had to be. Money actually curbs creativity. I have that theory, and the Space taught me that. And it stood me in sort of amazing stead creatively, I think, throughout my life. There is no greater commodity than imagination. And there's no creativity more substantial than that. So...
Should I just jump in? The
Yes.
reason why we had all the women playing men is that all the best actors were women.
That's right. That's
were
what I
women.
was going... Yes, exactly.
And so
right.
we just cast that way.
Exactly, yes.
It was amazing. It worked well.
It was, again, that was an expression of the Space firing on the cylinders that it had, which were, okay, so this is what we have and this is what we'll use, because we can't go and hire in that. We have this, we'll turn this into that in an imaginative and amazing way. So you had women playing men. That was wonderful. I mean, Aletta Bezuidenhout was an astounding actress. Arturo Ui called for an astounding performer actor, and we didn't have anyone who could play that role as well as she could. So how thrilling for an audience and for actors. It stretches everybody. Bring back the space.
When we went to the townships, I have to say, I actually thought, knowing how sort of the male-dominated that society was, I thought they're not going to swallow having this woman playing.
They swallowed it hook, line and sinker. Nobody even remarked. Nobody even thought it was strange. It was fantastic going to that township. It was amazing. I have a picture, and I tried to find it before coming because I thought I would bring it with me, but it's buried deep in a box somewhere. But it was a picture of me running with all these little children, holding hands with, as many as I could hold hands of. And
it's not in that, but those are the pictures.
Those are the pictures of it. Yeah, my God, this brings back memories. Amazing. Yeah. The geese. Just a picture, of me running with all those kids. Because, I mean, what's lodged in my memory about taking Arturo Ui to the townships was not playing it. I have no memory of playing it there at all. I only have a memory of the interaction with particularly the children. Because, I mean, it's hard for people to understand how difficult it was to be there, how difficult it was to get there, how difficult it was to even have put oneself in the position of wanting to go there. I mean, it was such a rigid, ghastly system. It's, time, so much time has passed that I fear people kind of forget, or may not fully appreciate what the space really was up against and did and achieved. And, it nurtured attitudes and minds and the getting together of people in the most extraordinary, valuable, fundamental way. I mean, it was the most seminal thing in my life. It was the most nurturing 6 months I've ever spent in my entire life. It's, I think, why I've gone on to, do a film which freed 6 men from an unjust imprisonment of 17 years, the Birmingham 6, fight a landlord for 2.5 years and, fight through to the High Court and set a legal precedent in England on housing. I mean, everything I became in later life was directly attributable, I think, to the nurturing of my mind and values at the space. It was, in 6 months, it was my 6 months of upbringing. And all the years that had gone before was not good parenting. That's how I feel about my time at the space. So for me, the most significant thing about being in that township with Arturo Ui was the children and just being there, just interacting with them and saying to them, there is a future, there is a hope, there is something to fight for. I remember also going on station platforms and disseminating leaflets, and on the black station platforms where we weren't allowed to be, and, daring to do some things because I realized how important it was to take some kind of action. But I have to say, I got very frustrated with the fact that there was such a mountain to climb. We spoke about this a little earlier. You get to a point where there is so much to do, and you think, well, to really do it, I must stop acting. I mustn't, acting doesn't change the world. It does in small ways, it does in significant ways, and it does over generations and given time. But it was so urgent that things changed there, that it was a terribly uncomfortable feeling. And I have to say, because I do have some self-knowledge, I was also very ambitious personally. So I knew that for me to have, I either had to have a career and go elsewhere to have it, or I had to just give up the career and become a lawyer or a politician or get arrested, or, it was a very, very difficult time. Lived somewhere else in
everybody
digs.
else was, Mama Liz had a room upstairs,
Yes.
and there was a whole bunch of them. There were about 5-6 people living upstairs.
Yeah, no, I never lived there. I lived in digs, in just this room hired off someone. And I think Duart and Caroline and I all lived together in this one room. But Mama Liz.
Anyhow, so the next thing is the geese.
The geese, or the guys, very hard to know which to say, but that play was immensely relevant to, of course, where we were and what we were doing, and to the core of the space, because it was set in England at a time when the theatres were closed. It was the ultimate censorship. And of course, it was the ultimate irony that that play at the space, that production, was banned. I think pretty soon after it opened, within a day or 2 days, that was it, over. And what happened historically in the play was that theatre went underground. It was forced underground. And of course, that is precisely what the space was doing, in a sense, was keeping the sort of theatre that we should have had in South Africa, a theatre for all people of South Africa, alive at a time when it was banned. It was not allowed to have black people and white people interacting in a public space. So the play couldn't have been more relevant to the space, and the banning of it couldn't have been a more see-through, pathetic act by idiotic, stupid people. It was just laughable, really, that they had no kind of sense even of irony or any kind of sense at all. And what a wonderful response to that banning. Within, was it 48 hours? I mean, incredibly
just
quickly.
over a weekend.
Over a weekend.
Friday afternoon till Tuesday when we reopened.
Amazing. You had literally got together a response to this in the form of a whole nother play. How did we do it? Did we improvise any of it? Did you write it? How on earth did we achieve that? It doesn't seem possible to me now.
Dermot wrote one play, Jerry wrote one play, and I can't remember if somebody else wrote a third play. And then we gathered material, and everybody went off and gathered material. What we couldn't do was criticize the censor board.
Right.
Okay, we were not allowed to say they were wrong.
They were wrong to ban
So
it.
what we did is we inverted that and went and said, mea culpa. Oops, sorry. We're wrong. However, we're a bit confused at what's actually out there.
Yes, and what's being
allowed. So we're trying to find out what we
What
can
is
and can't
obscenity?
do.
What
so we
is
had
allowed?
Bob Marley singing about ganja on the SABC. We had all of those sexual things. We quoted from novels. We did all kinds of things. Just finding all the worst material we could, which was allowed.
Absolutely.
And all I would say is, so is that it? I'm a little bit confused
a bit
about
confused,
this.
yes.
And then it culminated in that amazing thing which referred to the Play Birds of Paradise.
Right.
And the three of you were incredibly brave, actually, to come
Yes.
out.
With our little nipple caps and our
little nipple caps.
and tiny little feathers covering our...
Yeah. That's you up there, by the way.
Yes, that's right.
That's her.
And that's really me, not a doll.
Okay. That's really her.
Hanging for a long time.
And there they are.
Oh my
You
God,
over
yes.
on the left, yeah.
My God. Oh, it was so shaming, that experience. Just looking at that photograph brings it all back. The sense of shame, because that was truly shameful. Birds of Paradise, that sordid, ghastly sexual titillation that those white middle-class, carrion feasted on, that was obscene. And of course, that's what the disguise, which was the response to the banning of the guise, was doing, was, pointing out the hypocrisy of the censors and, well, ultimately the values of that society, which the censors saw themselves as the gatekeepers of. Because, there was true obscenity all around us, being allowed, being encouraged, and yet something as serious as, rape, because we any kind of sexual content of the play, The Geese, that we had banned, any of the kind of sexual grounds that the censors will have had for banning that was always critically within a context of, it was rape. It was an important issue that needed highlighting and looking at, as compared with what we showed in The Disguise, which was, sex for the sake of titillation, the kind of superficial ghastliness of girls with, little tiny feathers and that sort of sordidness, which was not just allowed, but encouraged by that society. Again, that was the space in all of its true spirit and majesty and dignity, coming back creatively in 3 days, doing something astounding. I mean, how rich those audiences were to have that theatre in its midst.
Could you just talk briefly about that actual moment when the three of you had to go on? Because remember, there was no text. We did it
yes.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 5 times, and you just came out, each
And
one of
just
you,
said
and
what
just
we
made
felt,
a statement
didn't we?
about how they felt about this and how they felt about the geese. But just tell us about that feeling
Yes.
of walking on stage like that.
Having just seen this picture of the three of us, Pippa, Caroline and I, standing there with these pathetic little feathers covering 2 nipples and covering our lower parts. I mean, it just really does bring back that feeling of total shame. I mean, it was so sordid, so awful standing there. Somehow these feathers did it all. It would have been fine standing there naked somehow, but standing there with these pathetic little feathers. And of course, what we had to do was just tell the audience how we felt. And of course, I felt abused by these feathers somehow. Sordid, horrible, because it was such an obvious projection of some ghastly male fantasy onto me, and then telling them how we felt about performing in the Geese, which was art and creative and serious and important. And
Do you remember they used to laugh when you came on, the audience?
did they laugh in nervousness? Did they?
Well,
do
no,
you
because
remember
everything else had been funny, and then
Yes.
you three walked out, and of course you look at that and
Okay.
you think, what's this? And they would laugh.
Yes.
And then there was that
And then it
lovely,
got
they just
turned.
got quieter. They'd stop laughing. And people would go out, and because we then had an interval, and people actually were in a bit of shock during the interval.
Right.
Because of what had come through. The 3 statements just used to bowl them over.
And were those statements different every night?
Every night they were slightly different. yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, they were all around the same thing.
Yes.
But we didn't have time to
didn't
write
script
them.
it.
And I
Yes.
said to you, we can't write this and act it. So it's best if you just improvise it every
Yes.
night.
How fantastic. Oh. I'm so proud of having been a part of that theatre. I mean, so proud of it. There's nothing like it, is there, anywhere, really?
There probably is. You just
Didn't know
You
about
just
it.
never know, you know.
Yeah.
Because mostly the good theatres like that never get any publicity. We were just fortunate in having Athol and Yvonne that raised
I guess so.
our...
They raised the profile because
Enormously,
there's
yeah.
no question. I mean, the space was
Yeah.
known, and that probably was also quite a protective mechanism for it, wasn't it? That they couldn't quite completely obliterate it because it was too known.
Yeah, just a bit more about Mama Liz and Kathy.
Okay. Mama Lizzie. Mama Lizzie had the most ample bosom the world has ever known, and the comfort of being hugged by Mama Lizzie. Of course, to me, Mama Lizzie was my surrogate mother because I was away from home for the first time. And she was just all love and all embracing and all supportive. And Arthur, who I loved deeply. And Farouk, wonderful human beings. It's very, very hard, I think, for people who were not in South Africa in those years to understand quite what this system was. I mean, are there many people now in America, for example, who remember what segregation was way back then? It was, for me, someone who hadn't been brought up really in South Africa at a very early age. I was born in Israel and grew up there till I was 9. And then my father, who was a South African, took the whole family out to South Africa, ostensibly for 2 years, but we just stayed on and on. And then I left when I was 19 after the space to come to London. So when I arrived in South Africa, I was full of sort of curiosity about, why were there these people who had all these different rules applying to them? Now, also, it has to be said, in Israel, I hadn't really seen black-skinned people. So here were, these exotic creatures for me, because I hadn't seen them before, but they were people who had a whole set of rules restricting everything they did. We had a maid, and that maid lived in our building, but way up at the top of this high-rise block we lived in a tiny little room that was like a cell. I used to go up there, and I used to think, where she talks about her children, but her children can't sleep here because there is only this one tiny bed. And then I learned that this totally unnatural thing was pervading her life, which was that she could only see her children twice a year. When she was allowed to go back, I think it was the Transkei that she hailed from. And Edith's life was confined to living this existence just to keep alive and to have some pittance to send back to her family and educate her children. She's separated from her husband. She wasn't allowed men in that room. So she couldn't even have a visit. I mean, it was like an imprisonment. Now, I'm going into that much detail because I'm not sure that people really understand quite how bad it was. She had to carry her passbook everywhere she went. But it was really the condition of, being totally and utterly separated in this most inhumane way from her family. Now, my mother would say that she treated her maid very well, that she gave her more money than the minimum wage, but it didn't even occur, I don't think, to my mother, who is a wonderful person, but it didn't really occur to her. And it occurred to me, I suppose, out of a childlike curiosity. But did I do anything about it as a child? Did I shout at my mother and father for allowing this? No, because I wasn't yet, it wasn't processed. When it became processed was when I went to university and, later in my later school years, where I thought, not only is this wrong, not only is this shocking, not only is this iniquitous, I need to do something about it. So I did what other young people who, have their eyes opened to an unjust situation tend to do. Protest, join in demonstrations, all of which sounds quite innocuous and easy to do, but actually in apartheid South Africa, it was highly dangerous. You knew you were filmed, you were photographed, certainly, any demonstration you went to. And the troublemakers were, there was, of course, a terrible system of terror to try and discourage young people from doing this very thing. I would go onto black station platforms with leaflets and hand them out. If I was found there, I would be arrested and put into prison for a very, very long time, because this was against the law. It was not allowed. There was that group of people who had to be subjugated and kept in their place, and the others had to be completely impervious to that, and leave it to the state to manage that situation. It was a kind of, it was a reign of terror if you had a heart that that beat, or a heart that, cared in any way about the plight of the people who were in the vast majority and surrounded you in that country. Terrible, terrible thing to have been part of that, and, and not have done enough. I mean, I'm Jewish. I'm brought up to not forget the Holocaust. How dreadful that people can be so hypocritical as to worry about one set of human beings and not about another. And, and we are still, look at the world we live in. It's awful, isn't it? We're still so completely and utterly blind. Africa doesn't really matter to anyone. It's not on anyone's agenda still. It's heartbreaking.
Ethel once was interviewed, and he said, and I saw this quite a long time later, and he was just talking about the whole thing, and he said the late 1970s were the darkest hours in South Africa. And they were. I gave up hope.
I gave up hope, absolutely.
It's a whole list of
it was
people,
exactly then.
I ended up here with quite a few friends from there. People left in waves in South Africa. There was
and it was at that point.
Rivonia wave, there was the early 70s wave, and then
the late
one was
70s.
the late 70s. People just said, that's it.
That's it.
I went to a meeting when the space closed with we had all of it was the Benai Birth ladies.
Oh.
And they invited me to come and talk to them about the history of the space and they could tell me more about the history because they were our club members,
Yes.
When we had the Jewish holidays, we may as well.
I think the extraordinary thing about actually being in that little world of the space, it was a kind of magical oasis, which insisted on being inclusive, humane, committed, passionate, responsible, moral. It insisted on embodying and expressing and living all those values which the authorities in South Africa tried to stamp out, the best, that dignified part of human nature that they tried to nullify. It's as though there was this little revolutionary camp which was allowed to carry its flame burning. And anybody who came within that little world, that little nucleus of a family, that's how it felt primarily. It was an extended family. And I think, for me, the moment at which that first crystallized was that very first night when I was there. I knew nobody. And I was there alone, away from home for the first time. My two friends, Caroline and Duart, who were to join me, hadn't yet joined. I had said goodbye to my mother on a station platform that morning in Johannesburg, or was it the day before, where this was it, goodbye, mummy, forever, little girl, going out into the big wide world. And I sat there in the theatre watching my first play at the Space, had this panic attack, and ran out of the theatre and into the arms of Mama Lizzie. And for me, that was the embodiment of what that special world in the Space was. Because here was a big-hearted, Mother Earth with black skin, embracing this little middle-class girl with white skin who had lived a totally opposite existence from her, totally separate existence, brought together by a need to help, in this case, me. It didn't matter which of the human beings needed helping. It didn't matter that their skins were of different colors. What mattered was that there was a nurturing, loving embrace. And that is, for me, embodies the whole spirit of the space. That there were people who came together there who cared about people of whatever skin color, who cared about changing a system that was iniquitous and unjust, who cared about supporting each other. And they did that. And that was the most extraordinary little world. It was like the perfect world within this nightmare, surreal landscape where everything was wrong. But we managed to do that. I managed to have my relationship with Arthur, which I couldn't do outside of the space. I remember going with Arthur to, did he live in Langa or Guguletu? Which was?
No, he lived in Grassy Park.
Grassy Park.
Remember, in South African terms, he was coloured.
Yes, but where I had to be smuggled in, really, to where he lived. I went and spent some nights with him.
Oh, that was not
legal.
And
that was not legal. And so I had remembered it these years later as being a township, but only because, so it obviously wasn't, but it was a different kind of enclosed community where I wasn't allowed, I wasn't meant to be. So there, yes, we would occasionally, there were these little glimmers of light where we could take things outside of the space theatre, that little tiny place we found ourselves in. And of course, that was, part of the glory of the place was, that you were disseminating the right kind of attitude to your fellow being outside of that. But it was very limited, the degree to which you could do that. And being within it, it was like being in a womb, really, is the only way I can describe it. This protective, wonderful, and you were my father. So actually, when I came to you saying I want to go to London, it was an important thing for me to do. You were the only one who could sort of give me your blessing to go. It was important for me to, as with my own father, if you had said, don't go, which I think you basically did, don't be silly, don't go, I would still have gone because I was a rebellious child, but but I needed your blessing.
okay.
Yeah, is that okay? Did that give us a...
That was wonderful.
Fine, good.
Yeah. Listen to